I'm so glad you're here. I'm Kate Champion. I'm an author, therapist, and generally curious human whose life has been full of ups and downs, twists and turns, mess and adventures, some intentional and some not so much. Welcome to Living Big Mindfully, a later in life podcast. Here are 3 questions for you. Are you ready? Are you in midlife or beyond? Or maybe struggling with next steps or finding your feet? Possibly feeling like something's missing, not quite right with your life? Or maybe you have a sense that you're really not living your own truth. Okay, you're right, that was way more than 3 questions. But were there any yes answers? Yeah? Okay, fantastic. That means that you are in the right place and this is the show for you. So grab a seat, get comfy, and join us for inspiring, heartfelt conversations. Conversations with real people just like you and me. Listen in as we chat about life, love, health, healing, and thriving well into our later years. And let's commit to creating honest, fulfilling lives and giving a high five to living big mindfully. One more thing. Make sure you visit katechampionauthor.com. Check out Never Too Late and You Are Limitless, my best-selling books. And while you're there, be sure to download your free hiking guide. And remember, check out our Living Big Mindfully community on Facebook. And please share your favorite episode with your friends. Thank you so much. Okay, that is enough for me. Are you ready? Great. Then let's dive in. In today's episode of Living Big Mindfully, we are exploring mindfulness, meditation, and trauma with therapist and meditation teacher Amita Schmidt. Amita has been teaching Vipassana meditation for over 25 years. She's a psychotherapist and an author. Amita offers so much heartfelt wisdom. I'm really excited to be able to offer you this today. Just a warning, we jump right in and we share more and more deeply as our conversation unfolds. And because we cover so much, I do suggest you give yourself permission to settle back, relax, and really give yourself the time to enjoy the show today. This may be one of those episodes you listen to a couple of times to really soak up all the magic. In today's show, you'll learn about the differences between mindfulness and meditation, why and how a mindfulness practice is so helpful in the healing process, and why it's important to have low expectation when you're beginning a mindfulness practice. Then Amita goes on to dispel some of the myths and misinformation surrounding mindfulness and meditation. In the second half of the show, we take a deep dive into trauma, what it is, what it isn't, and the importance of telling your story, working it through, and taking the time to really hold and honor the wounds, sometimes over and over and over again. We touch on compassion, freedom, love, and how being lost in thought can be a beautiful process. We share and discuss some of the practices we have personally used in our own healing journeys. And throughout the show, you'll find Amita weaves in a lot of practical tools, strategies, and heartfelt sage advice. It's an honor to have Amita on the show. She holds a special place in my heart. Amita has been a huge part of my healing process. And I hope this warm, compassionate conversation stirs something in you. Hello, how are you?
I'm good, Kate. Great to see you.
It is great to see you too. And I'm super excited to have you on the program, on the show. I'm just really, really thankful for your time. And yes, so a little background. Amita and I, we are connected. We're connected. Amita is my therapist, and she's also, I would call her my spiritual guide. And we've done a lot of work together. And I just have a heartfelt gratitude for Amita, and I'm just so excited to have her today with her
wisdom and all that she brings to the world. So thank you so much for coming.
Welcome, Kate.
So tell us a little bit about you and your journey and kind of who you are. Fill us in a little bit.
Sure. Well, I came to the meditation and therapy path through a lot of suffering. I had two parents that had mental illnesses, and my mom died of suicide when I was young, and my dad was quite violent. And then my mom's, I was kind of adopted by my mom's sister, and then she also killed herself. So there was just a lot to work through there. And I had a really severe depression myself from a very young age, starting at age 5. I had my first suicidal thought at age 5. So there was just a lot of trying to work out why am I here? How do I get through this kind of massive suffering I found myself in? And, lots of people have really difficult lives, and it just felt like I wanted to understand life. So I kind of went into therapy and meditation about the same time. And you can talk about it later, but as a result of the combination, but a lot because of meditation, the severe kind of matriarchal hereditary depression I'd had my whole life disappeared. So it really was phenomenal tribute to what meditation and therapy can do together. So I guess I wanted to share that part of my story. So if anybody has depression or, even anxiety issues, I had that as well. It can really be, healed through these tools. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm curious, what age did you kind of come to therapy and come and find meditation? What kind of age were you? I'm curious about that.
Yeah, I was in my early 20s, and I went to social work school at 21. So, when you're immersed in therapy methods, and I think they required that we went to therapy as part of our training. And I found my first meditation retreat was at 24, and I was like smitten. I just went nuts. I went on long retreats, and many of them. And then I started doing a 3-month retreat about 4 years later. And so they kind of really went hand in hand around that same time. Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of leads me into my first question. We hear so much about mindfulness and meditation. What is the difference? And often those terms are used like the same word, but what would you say the differences are? Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah, it's a great question, because oftentimes people will, in modern day lexicon, they're using mindfulness and meditation as the same thing. Yeah. But mindfulness is a component of meditation. It's a tool that's focusing the mind with non-judgmental awareness. It's kind of an awareness tool that meditators can use. Now, there's kinds of meditation that don't use mindfulness, a concentration meditation where maybe you're focusing on a mantra or a candle flame. That does not use mindfulness. Mindfulness is a particular tool of insight meditation. And mindfulness can be used on its own. It doesn't have to be a meditation, but it is a tool of meditation. But you can use kind of mindfulness throughout your day, all day long, and it's not necessarily a meditation, although it is a focused awareness. That is the component of mindfulness, is a focused, non-judgmental awareness.
Got it. So as you're talking, I'm thinking about my day, and maybe an example might be that, when you're maybe in the shower in the morning, right, and you're trying to focus on, the heat and the water and the sound, and you're just really trying to kind of be in the body and be in that moment. Is that an example of mindfulness?
Yeah, that's a great example. You can pick one activity like that, especially a pleasant activity, and be aware, more closely aware I was talking with one of my students the other day, and he was like, "Oh, I'm really bored." And I said, "Be more mindful." A teacher told me that a long time. Boredom is lack of attention. Boredom is because we're not paying close attention. There's so much in every moment, so much awe and so much depth to every moment. And when we're bored, because we're just skimming on the surface. But I want to say something else about mindfulness. So you can take a one piece of your day and be mindful like that with the shower or flossing your teeth. But you can also be mindful of parts, like say you have an angry part come up, and you can, what happens with mindfulness is it immediately puts you in the awareness itself. So if you're mindful, I have an anxious part right now, or I have a depressed part, for 1 second, you actually move into just the pure awareness, and you're not blended or lost in that part. So mindfulness is a beautiful healing tool, because for the second that you're able to note it, you're not in it. It's like going up on a bridge above turbulent water. So it's a beautiful tool. And they actually have a research study with this guy named Lieberman that showed when you do the mindfulness label and you say, "Oh, that's an anxious part," or, I just got into worry, it moves it from the amygdala, the brainstem trauma brain, to the prefrontal cortex, where you have a lot more mastery. You're not lost in the feeling. So it actually has a physiological effect. It moves to a different place of the brain when you make a mindfulness label.
That's incredible. That's incredible. I mean, that's a pretty simple practice, right? To help, give you a moment of relief from any kind of suffering that you might be in, right? When you're caught up in that torrent of thoughts, right? Thoughts, and you're feeling the angry part or the frustrated part or the sad part, right? To just be able to step back and label that, oh, that's my little angry guy coming up, right? Is enough to really make a difference. Is that what you're saying?
Huge, yeah, because you have a moment of relief from it, even if you go right back into it. Also, the beauty of mindfulness, it's important to remember, a lot of people think of mindfulness as more precise, like your shower thing, but you can, mindfulness can take any object. It can take a precise small object, it can take a huge object. Deepa Ma, who I wrote about, she talked about like just knowing that you're rushing. Like when you're rushing in the car, like that's like a big mindfulness label. Oh, I'm rushing, versus that tiny little movement that you're doing in the car, touching the steering wheel. So you can go micro, you can go macro with mindfulness. It has the same effect. So it's a beautiful tool, and it doesn't matter where you're going with it, if it's big or small. It has the same effect of unblending you and having you rest in the pure awareness just for that second. Oh, I'm rushing. Boom. The minute you see that, you're not rushing.
Kind of burst the bubble, right? Kind of burst that bubble for a moment.
Yeah. Yeah. I joke, mindfulness can take any object. It doesn't matter. And so it's just this beautiful, I just say it's like this incredible universal tool.
Yeah. So the meditation is a little different because it's deeper, or it is more of a practice. So help me flesh that out a little bit.
Yeah, well, meditation is a really dedicated sitting. I mean, usually when people say meditation, they mean sitting meditation. There are walking meditations, eating meditations. But it's, I'll just say with sitting, it's a being more focused and using mindfulness as a tool. So when your thoughts wander, you notice, thinking mind or fear, emotion maybe, and then you bring yourself back to an object of meditation, whether it's the breath, or some people with trauma around the breath, that sounds is the meditation, or again, the concentration, it might be in that mantra that you're using. So you have another tool in the meditation that's not just mindfulness. You have a tool that often your secure base, your anchor, that you're coming back to often. I mean, there's some exceptions to that, but
Yeah.
as a general rule. So you have other tools you're working with in addition to mindfulness when you meditate. And it's a more dedicated and focused period where you're using mindfulness as a tool within that period. Yeah.
So an example might be you have, 5 minutes in the morning, right? You get up, you sit for 5 minutes, you do your meditation, but it's more focused, more of a practice, more intentional practice. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. And like I said, generally you have an anchor that you're coming back to, whether it's the breath or just, some Advaita people, they just have the still point in their body, just pure awareness that they come back to, but there's something you're coming back to. Whereas mindfulness can just be the awareness itself. We're really splitting hairs here. So.
Yeah.
Okay.
So tell me, you mentioned trauma a little earlier. So tell me a little bit about trauma. What is trauma, and how can mindfulness or meditation be helpful? And how does trauma affect us that we might need these tools?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. In a really simple way, I would say that trauma is an energetic clench in our whole emotional, energetic body. It's a clench. And oftentimes it's a clench from the past. So say you have a car accident, a lot of times, even though you might have healed an area where your muscles, clenched from the car accident, you often, that clench remains in your body and you have to work at it maybe for years to come. So trauma creates these emotional clenches. In flashbacks and things where you're just kind of stuck. Your system, the energy's not flowing. So that's really all it is. And so what meditation and therapy is doing is it's trying to open up the flow and the channels and let you know it's safe now. Those parts can release their clench. Basically, I would say meditation therapy is bringing incredibly deep safety to your system so you can relax and return to your natural state. Our natural state, like if you have to go back, maybe even in the womb for some people, because there was trauma in the womb, is just this, it's like just unconditional love, total relaxed, unconditional love. And then all the things that move us away from that, right? Someone yells. That violence, like I had to go through, and then I had to work through that body clench for years because of the violence to the body that happened.
Yeah. When you were talking about that natural state, I was resonating. It maybe feels a little bit like a completely limp noodle, right? You're just kind of super limp and super mushy, and you just completely limp, right? Completely relaxed, completely without tension, right? Without clenching.
Yes. And even people that don't have trauma, my teacher, Ajay Shanti, was saying once, he said, just a basic birth struggle, when you're going through a birth canal, it's painful, baby's being squished. And he said that we developed this kind of like just almost like a core clench, even without a traumatic family system. That's just kind of this core clench that goes, no, right? And he said, like at the end, the really bottom of meditation, even when you've undone all your trauma, is this core clench of self, and that, imagine going through the birth canal and just like, kind of like, it would get just, here we are like, oh, this is uncomfortable. And, they used to slap babies when they come out. So we developed this almost like this kind of pushing back against life. Because it's all these bright lights and noise. And so we do this kind of core clench we're not even aware of. So in a way, our natural state doesn't even include that core clench. It just is. And in Zen, they say, what was your face before you were born? Well, what was almost like your true nature, your true body, your true heart before you were born? It was free. It's freedom. Really, what we're talking about is, whether it's therapy or meditation, we're talking about freedom here. And you're right. Your birthright to return to freedom through every tool you can find, through just not giving up, continuing to seek complete and absolute freedom, our birthright. Yeah.
That's powerful. I know that we're both therapists. We're both therapists, and we both have a trauma in our background. And I know that we both work with a lot of trauma. And I don't know about you, but when people kind of walk into the office, you can kind of see it, right? You can kind of see it in their bodies. Like you can see it in the shoulders. I'm raising my shoulders and kind of clenching. Right? You can see it in the jawline. When you're sitting with somebody, sometimes you can kind of feel it kind of in the gut and the core. So I love what you're saying, that the work is about kind of melting that, right? It's kind of like melting and kind of working through these layers, because so much of that trauma is in the body, right? It's just living in the body on a cellular level. I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that the difference between, we think it's kind of in the mind and something that happened to us, but it's in the past, but it also lives in the present in our bodies. Like, can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, well, I think what you're saying is really true. You can see it. More and more, I just do kind of a different thing these days than I've been a therapist for, almost 30 years now in different capacities. And I focus on each person that comes in. They might be carrying that stuff in their body, and they might have an emotional or heartfelt clench. But everybody has this spark of true nature and this freedom place in their body. Everybody has the freedom place. So because it's your true nature, everybody has it, even like Putin or somebody. So I just focus on their freedom place, and I try to really lock into that and widen it and help them widen it. And, we might deal with what covers over that freedom place, which might look like that body clench or trauma. But it's more like everybody has a little speck of the sun inside, and I'm just trying to open that up more and more. And then that melts away the trauma. That's kind of a different way than the therapy world I'd been doing for, a couple decades in the beginning, where you're trying to pull stuff off. Yeah. Right. And this is more like you just focus on that sun on the inside, and you can do that with a vibration in your own body and in knowing it in yourself. And then you just open up that aperture of their true nature more and more and more. And then that kind of can melt away some of the trauma. I mean, it makes it sound really easy, but and everybody's different. Like, some people will let you do that easily, kind of go to their core and open up their sun. Other people won't. So it's really, and when people won't, I just kind of I'd like shine on to their trauma. I just believe that more and more that loving kindness is such a deep healing tool.
Yeah.
Trauma really is the absence of love in that moment, isn't it?
It really is.
So love can heal those trauma moments, whether they're body held or brain held, where love is a huge operative force. And I don't mean that in a kind of new agey way. The vibration of love is huge. And in meditation, metta or loving kindness, very healing practice. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's really interesting, you just say you're talking about the metta and the loving kindness practice just in a personal sense. I've been using that a little bit more, right, over the last, I don't know, couple of weeks in my morning meditation practice, just kind of this energy of kind of giving and receiving love and giving and receiving gratitude. And, for me, and then, family, and then the outer circle, and then the, planet and all the rest of it. They kind of get kind of wild in there. But I can tell you, I have really noticed a shift. I have a lot, maybe not a lot, but I definitely feel just more, I would say care. I just feel more care throughout my day, like care for others, care for the things I do, care for kind of the smaller things. So I think I'm hearing that this practice could really be helpful for somebody that has, these layers of trauma.
Yes.
And how might you help somebody? How might they practice that? How might they kind of use that tool, in their everyday to start to kind of heal some of these wounds?
Yeah. Well, one important thing is you don't ever want to be shamed into loving kindness practice. And, in the Buddhist scene, there's a lot about using loving kindness practice. And luckily, early on in my practice, Michelle McDonald said, "Oh, I hated metta or loving kindness for 15 years." And that was so helpful to me because I hated metta too. I'm not sure
why. Tell me why. Tell me about that.
I think when you're depressed, you have a lot of self-hatred thoughts, and metta is just like, ugh. It's like too sweet a meal or something. I don't know. I have no idea. I just had a total aversion. So, in what she said was so helpful because I was like, all right, I'm giving myself permission, my parts, right? I didn't know about parts then, but to hate metta, not like it, not want to try it, not want to do it. And then, years and years and years later, it might have been like 10 years, like her almost. Your system starts to soften and you start to realize, oh, this is a great tool and I actually like it. And I'm ready to practice it now. I want to practice it now. If it's just a tool you're slapping over parts, and I think my system knew, I would have just been slapping it on top of the depressed parts. And it's almost like I had to work with the depressed parts and really be with them and know them and then bring in the metta. So you really have to be careful, like no spiritual bypasses, that it's the right timing. Your parts really want to practice it. You're not forcing any parts. And that it's an evolution of your system to want to add this loving kindness. And, certain phrases. So back to your earlier part of the question, the Buddhist meditation has phrases that they use and maybe imagery. There's so many different ways to practice metta. And, you can certainly Google a lot of meditations about it. But there's certain phrases that make sure you pick phrases that really resonate with you. Like I was trying to learn about self-love. So one of the phrases I really liked that I only used that one was, I love myself completely, or, because I was trying to aspire to that, loving myself completely just as I am. That was the phrase. I love myself completely just as I am. And then I could include that depressed part, in the metta. It wasn't like I was trying to force out parts. So it's important that people find their phrases, or their imagery that really feels nurturing to them. Don't just because somebody says you're supposed to say this or do this. Make it your own. Make it your own. I mean, metta or loving kindness practice is about love. So you'll need to see what that means for you. And it might change over time. Definitely will change over time. Yeah.
Has it changed? Has it changed for you? Has it changed over time for you?
Yeah, I don't really use phrases anymore. It's almost like I had this image now of Deepa. She used to do these metta baths where she would just move her hands over the person's body, like sweeping with loving kindness. So sometimes now I just get this imagery of just sweeping my body and the mind with like a wave of love. It's very just very somatic and just over and over again, almost like you would stroke stroke somebody's hair, or it's just super kinesthetic now. Yeah.
It feels lovely. It feels very soothing, very peaceful.
Right. And the other piece that's developed with it is early on in practice, there was a me doing the metta. Like I was trying to do the metta, which could be complicated if you don't feel it, especially. But more and more now, and maybe this might be helpful to some of your listeners, is the metta does itself. I don't need to be in there. Like love is one of the operative forces of the universe. And you can just sit back and almost like let the metta operate on its own and do you. So it's almost like if you were a cell tower picking up cellular waves, like that doesn't involve a lot of doing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So the metta, when I do more of that washing through, I'm not doing it. It's more like I'm allowing it, the natural loving kindness forces out there it's a consent. I'm consenting to allowing them to wash through. Mm-hmm. And it's just so much more yin, the feminine quality of not trying to do something, but you're just, it's more and more I find practice is a non-doing. That's
what I'm thinking, right? Instead of I think we're so used to kind of doing and forcing and fixing and changing. And I can't tell you how many people come into my office and they want a solution. They want the list of things to do so they can feel better. But what I'm hearing from you, Amita, is that it isn't a doing. It isn't a doing, and it isn't even a thinking, right? We're not using our thoughts. We're using a whole different set of tools, if you like, right? Yeah. And I'm wondering how maybe some listeners might have a really hard time with that because they were so wired and conditioned for thinking and doing. I mean, think about our culture, think about work, think about school, think about families. We're so conditioned for the checklist, for the goal, for the thinking, right? That's a very different ball game for people. So maybe you could address that a little bit.
Right. I'm so glad you picked up on that. Yeah. Well, our culture is very yang energy. It's very doing, just very move forward. What can I get? Our therapy sessions are like the Time Life books, or you just one more and one more and one more and one more. Even meditation, okay, now I these endless books that come to your house, and you have another one to do. There's a time and place for that striving and for the doing, but eventually the doer really falls away. Because it's not really anything to begin with. People might object to this, but the doer is an illusion, okay? And eventually you'll see that. It's another way the illusion of self tries to come in. And we, as a culture, we really bought into the doer thing. And I'm sure capitalistic cultures encouraged it, right? Do, buy, work, consume, right. Buy, work, die, right? And so it's been kind of, in the last year, it's been really beautiful to watch. One thing that's really come to me meditation-wise is the other day, it was just so clear. This is a consent. It's a consent, which is more an opening, like an open hand. The yin quality, very feminine consent. This is a consent to 100% unconditional love inside and outside forever. And it really hit me that that's, if you're signing up to heal or to be free in meditation, it's a consent. And it just goes deeper and deeper. And as farther along you go, the you gets in the way. If you become a you in this consent process, the you gets in the way and it starts to dissolve more and more. And the unconditional love just starts to take over more and more and more. And then what'll be left when everything's, whether your story's gone, the you's gone, the doer's gone, what'll be left is 100% unconditional love inside and outside forever, which is all that's ever been here. So anything everything's 100% unconditional love, even the doer, even trauma, everything is somehow, because if it comes, that's the light of the projector, right? Think about it. This might be easier from some listeners. Think about like everything you're seeing in the movie. You turn around, whether it's the You movie, right? The Mita movie, the Kate movie, you turn around in the light of the projector that creates, whether it's a negative experience in Kate's life or a positive one, the light of the projector is the same thing. So you could call it source consciousness or pure awareness. You're kind of just returning back to whatever creates all these things. I don't expect everyone to kind of get this or agree with me, but it's just been a dawning about what a beautiful process this is of giving way, consenting to this source consciousness that is benevolent. It's not evil, or it might, images might show up that look evil, but when you really look back at the light of the projector, it's something else. Something else. And that, people might call it God. Everybody has a different name for it.
As you're talking, what's coming up for me is this concept of kind of, shining, being able to shine the light on us, on the thought stories, right? If we can shine the light or have more awareness on some of that, on some of our thought stories, especially if we're struggling with trauma or depression or anxiety, and we can begin to see those habitual stories that are manifested by our thinking, right? For example, I'm not safe, or I'm not good enough, or I'm not deserving. I hear those painful stories over and over and over again in people. So being able to see those thought stories and kind of put the spotlight on them in many ways sounds like it could be a powerful tool for people.
Yeah, and it kind of comes full circle to what we were talking about. The awareness itself is never depressed. It's never anxious. It's never caught in a story. So in a way, what we're talking about is just, again, going to pure awareness. The awareness that can see the thought or see your angry part is not any of that. Awareness itself has no trauma. Parts of us do or carry it. And like you said, sometimes body stuff. It's a tricky thing, though, because there's a time and place for everything. And sometimes it's important. And I did this, too, for a long time, to tell your story and to be working on it and looking at it. But so I'm giving people just the ultimate view. A lot of times we need to really piece through our story and work it through and be down in the trenches and be dealing with the emotions and going through all that. And I'm just trying to say, hey, ultimately your true nature, the awareness itself, it's a loving presence and it has no trauma. So if people can just keep that in mind, even if they're not there yet, that is around and that's available. to people. But yeah, and I want to add one more thing. When you were talking, a practice you can do, but make sure it's not a spiritual bypass, is when you're having a difficult thought, you can ask, or any thought, what's the source of the thought? Like, what's the source of it? And you might say stillness or emptiness, or, every thought, you can trace the thought back to a non-thought place, back to pure awareness. So every thought's a beautiful thing. Every emotion is, you can trace it. What's the source of emotion? What's the source of me right now? What's the source of a thought? So thoughts don't have to be an impediment. They can be almost like a pole that we slide down to the unconditioned, to the truth, to the pure awareness.
I love that. I love that. As you were talking, I was imagining kind of, you mentioned, as people work through trauma, there's layers, right? There's the beginning where you're just trying to kind of figure this out and find your feet and stabilize. And then there's all these layers, like to a true kind of healing, if you like. So the healing would be just, the trauma now becomes just a non-event, right? It's something that happened, but there's no reaction to it. It's like, kind of like we were talking earlier, right? You shared with me that you didn't want to get into your story too much because it seems so far away. And I was saying, yeah, it's so weird because, family members will say, oh, you poor thing, this happened, the other happened. And for me, it's like, oh, well, yeah, but it was like back there with the dinosaurs. I don't even, it's laughable at this point. But a lot of people are not on their journeys. They're not that far along their journey. So they're just kind of coming into this. So you talk about, the layers, and I love the imagery of just kind of holding, right? Taking some time to hold, right? Hold the pain, hold the suffering, hold the trauma, hold the depression, hold the fear, hold the anxiety, like all these parts, right, that have been so wounded. They need the compassion, right? They need the grace. They need the holding. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about kind of compassion, and how that kind of fits in here as well in this healing journey.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. It's a lot like what we talked about with mindfulness. You can bring in that love and compassion at any place. You can bring it in when you're super dysregulated and anxious. You can hold, it's a big holding of your parts that are maybe freaking out with love and compassion. Or you can go in there and be more fine-tuned with particular parts of your story or a particular event. So compassion and love are always available to hold anything, right? Small, big. It's such a beautiful tool.
Yeah.
When we use it, because compassion softens, it helps us relax, right? And people might not know, like, compassion practice is a little different than loving kindness. And I actually started with compassion because I didn't like the metta or the loving kindness, but compassion is more feeling the suffering. And I really felt the suffering early on my practice. So it's described in Buddhism once as a quivering of the heart in response to suffering. So it's a bringing love in via the suffering, which I found easier to access as a practice. So it might be feeling the suffering in you or in others. And then love gets created or generated via that, versus loving kindness is kind of a more, it doesn't necessarily touch into the suffering component.
Okay. So I'm a super practical kind of person. Could you give me like an example of the compassion and the holding? Could you give me and listeners an example of how they might begin to hold some of their suffering with compassion? That might that actually look like in practical kind of everyday terms?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So say you're going to do something at work and you're nervous, right, about it, or there's some kind of anxious energy. I always try to envision my parts like little kids. So say you're feeling nervous and you have a part comes in and says, don't be nervous, right? Judging yourself. And what you would do is you would just imagine like that nervous party, like an 8-year-old kid or a 6-year-old kid. And generally when we see this aspect of ourselves that's stuck as a young child, we immediately know what to do. And if you saw a little 6-year-old that was nervous, you go over and put your hands on their shoulders or hold them and go, hey, it's okay. And you'll get through this and I'll be here with you, right? And so we naturally kind of know how to do that compassion or that love if we think of whatever's stuck in you almost like a young child, and any age is fine. But we have that compassionate heart so easily for kids. And so this is just a kid part in you that's like stuck for some reason, and we'll get over it. It'll get unstuck. And, like with kids, because you're a mom, Kate, it's like however many times you need to do it. If this kid get nervous before doing something at work 1,000 times, who cares? It's your kid. And if you have to do it 1,000 times, you do it 1,000 times because you're here for your parts forever until they're done. And there's no watch that we pull out, right? Mm-hmm. With kids, you're not sitting there going, well, when is this parenting support going to be over? I mean, I don't know, maybe some parents do. But, you sign up for the duration with your parts and your trauma. You really sign up for the duration. And it's not linear. So that's kind of a fun thing to see. But you're just here for whatever it takes. And if you have to meet a depressed part for the rest of your life, then that's your work. That's your love. That is your movement of love. That's what really helped me, was one of the linchpins of my depression leaving, was after 20 years of working with it, I was like, really, it's still here. Like I've done all this meditation and all this therapy. It's still here. And there was a moment, and I didn't do this, where it was like, you know what? That's fine. Like I'm going to be here for this depressed part. If that's all I do the rest of life, I just totally surrendered and accepted it. And then several months later, the whole thing just was gone, like disappeared. So it really was born out of this unconditional this movement, this consent. Again, I didn't sit down and go, well, I'm going to unconditionally love this forever. It was just like what happens in your mind is you realize it's the only way. Like you're trying everything else. And I tried kind of faking accepting it, that, oh, I'm really okay that it's here. And this was a moment where it just, the body just, look, if it's fine. It's here forever. Okay. Even another lifetime, whatever. It was a total being pulled in by a power greater than myself, a consent.
That's beautiful. Just connecting with a lot of peace right now, right? I can't imagine how much kind of peace and relief that must have been for you to get to that point. Yeah.
Yeah. It was quite a surprise. I think when you really have insights and big changes, that they almost take you by surprise because they're so simple and they're so obvious. And, and it's such an amazing journey. They talk about in Buddhist meditation, they say the Dharma or Buddhist teachings is beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end. And I would say this healing journey, this freedom journey, and they're really one and the same. It's beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, beautiful in the end, because it's all about learning this consent to unconditional love. And whether you're working on the gross aspects of your trauma early on, or you're working on these more fine aspects of just no doer here, it's a beautiful journey of unconditional love at every point. And if you can hold it that way, even when you get lost and frustrated and overwhelmed, as a journey, a consent into deeper and deeper levels of unconditional love. And, I've healed from an eating disorder as well. That was part of my history. And they talked about early on ever increasing levels of self-care as a piece to healing addiction. And I would say that really fits in with this. This is ever increasing levels of unconditional love. And that does heal trauma. That does heal addictions. And obviously there's a lot of tools to heal addictions. That's a complicated matter. I didn't do it without a 12-step program and support of other people.
Yeah, that's powerful. I really appreciate you kind of sharing that with me. Thank you. Could we move on to some maybe kind of practical tips for listeners, right? If we have some listeners that have never maybe touched the edges of a meditation practice or a mindfulness practice, how might somebody, kind of super practical, how might somebody start? Do they need special tools or equipment? Do they need a community? How would you suggest somebody kind of start?
I think you do need to connect with other people around. I mean, there's a lot of apps and a lot of things out there, and you can do a lot of meditations on your own. And but ultimately, a sitting group, whether it's a virtual or an in-person sitting group that might have some kind of leader. Because if you're just starting out, there's going to be a lot of questions. And there's going to be a lot of support needed so that you can have somebody you can talk to. So if you get stuck in your thoughts or something, that person can help give you ideas about what to do. And you can get those some from books, and, you read books, listen to a lot of meditations, but you really do need the person component. So that person can help you when you kind of get off base, you're going too far to the left. No, a book's not necessarily going to do that. Somebody that's maybe a facilitator of a sitting group could help you, or you'll hear somebody else and what they did when you're going through that. So I think kind of a real-time group or sitting with others is important.
That's helpful. In my practice, not my meditation, my therapy practice, I do have people that are interested in mindfulness and meditation, and they'll come in and they say they tried it and it doesn't work for them. And all they can do is kind of think about their thoughts, and they can't clear their mind. And there's lots of myths around how it kind of should be. I think that one of the biggest ones I hear is that I have to clear my mind. And of course, I think that's pretty impossible, right, for humans to kind of completely clear their minds. Like, it's going to be a crystal clear pond in there, and you can see all the way to the bottom, maybe at some point. But in the beginning, clearing the mind and sitting still and, having the stream of thoughts that are going to come in. How might you help coach somebody, with those types of questions, all those types of concerns kind of in the beginning?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's really a misnomer, a mistake to imagine that experienced meditators have these like crystal clear minds with no thoughts. So get rid of that idea. That's not true. Even really experienced meditators who struggle with thoughts forever. And, thoughts are a very powerful force, and they rule our lives. So of course, the minute you sit down on the cushion, they're going to be right there. But use thoughts as your practice. Don't make them the enemy that you're trying to get rid of thoughts.
Tell me more about it. Tell me more. Yeah. Tell me more about using thoughts as a practice. Tell me more about that.
Well, sort of like we talked about before, when thoughts come, you could just look at, well, what's the source of this thought? Thoughts come out of silence. So you could trace back the thought to just the unconditioned. So there's that. That's a little harder. Generally what you're doing is it's a mind training. Like any training, you're going to be not very good at it. So you have your object of meditation, which might be the breath, and you realize you were lost in thoughts for 20 minutes. Fine. Just coming back to the breath, and you're training yourself when you're lost in thought to come back to something. Normally without meditation, we're lost in thought. We go, oh, we're lost in thought. And then we go immediately do another thought or something else. So this is kind of training you to come back to what's called an anchor. So even if you're lost a million times, think of it as a million times training to come back to your anchor. And a lot of people get really disappointed when the thoughts come and they go, oh, I'm lost in thought, right? But notice what a miracle that is. You could notice all the times you wander off, or you could notice the times you come back. It's a true miracle. You don't even try to do it. Like, pay attention to that. Like, here you were in a daydream and boom, all of a sudden you're going, oh, the breath. Like, how did that happen? Like, what miracle was that you remember to be mindful and celebrate that, even if it's just one time in a sit? Look, the Buddha said one moment of mindfulness is worth 100 years of a life of not. So if you sit down in a meditation and you can have awareness, I always have these bottom lines for a meditation. It's to be aware of one thought, to come back to one mindful moment of breath. Oh, the breathing, right? That's like my bottom line for any time I sit, is to have just one moment. Speaking of that endless, yang energy, we never can do enough. Just always have a bottom line for your sit. And have it just be one moment of coming back to the breath. Yay. And of course, as you progress, you'll have more than one moment, but don't make it a lot more than one moment. That's worth, if you hadn't sat, you would have had an hour of lost in thought. We really raised the bar way too high.
I think that's actually a great point, right? So it's keeping those expectations very simple, right? Very low, starting out with 5 minutes, starting out with 10 minutes, expecting thoughts, expecting there's going to be discomfort. Yes.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And I'd like to add to it. Generally, we have a lot of thoughts. It's a part, and you can work with that part. So, your thoughts might be going on and on and on about a work project or something. And you could say, oh, there's a part that's really worried about that. So you might want, instead of labeling the thoughts, you might want to just label, oh, that's a part that's worried. Do that compassion. Hey, not now. You can say to that part, not now. We'll deal with that later. It's kind of like when you have nighttime dreams, things will come up that you're trying to work through. When we sit on the cushion, it's no different. There's these parts are like, they're going nuts, like a nighttime dream. And so it's okay to label those parts, to meet them with compassion. Then they might settle down for a few minutes and you're with the breath. But remember, working with your thoughts will be a lifetime thing in practice. So don't worry about it. I worked with this really fierce monk named U Pandita. He was this Burmese monk that was just known to be so fierce with people. And he had like this trick he would do, even with really old meditators. Like, I'd been practicing like 15 years when I met him. And he'd be like, you come into your interview and he'd say, well, how long are you able to be with the breath? And, if people said, 5 minutes, or he would just like ring the bell and move them out, because he knew even experienced meditators, probably the longest you could be with the breath is like a couple minutes, even on retreat. So he knew that if people were saying, I'm with the breath for like 10 minutes, that they were not aware and they were not consciously lying, but they were lost in illusion. Because our ability to really be on the breath is short. But don't worry about that. Just come back a million times. Like I said earlier, have a commitment However many times you need to be with your depression, anxiety part, however many times you need to be with your thinking part, who cares? You come back. Thinking's not the enemy. And I want to say one more thing about thoughts. And I did a little thing on Insight Timer about this, but I realized that thinking is a protector part. And often when we really have a lot of thoughts in a sit, it's a protector part that's trying to either scare the silence, or it's worried about something else, or, so you kind of just with love and compassion, not to do analysis on the cushion, but just go, what is this thinking protecting? What it's trying to keep you from something. Protectors are always trying to keep you from something. So you could just float that question like, oh, if I wasn't thinking so much, what might be here? What might I end up having to feel? Well, thinking might be a protection from anxiety or feeling worthlessness when you're on the cushion. So you could just, if you wanted, if it really is, that seems like something you might want to investigate a little.
Yeah, I love that.
And you could have, like in practice, you can have part step back. You could try having your whole thinking part step back. Then what? Yeah. You could do that in daily life or on the cushion. What's here now? If you have your thinking part, I'll do it too right now. Just
yeah.
What's knowing life? If your thinking part's back there, not leading the show. What does know life? And generally, it's the heart, or it's just life is knowing life. And you're thinking part, talker, right? But this, not affect. It doesn't matter whether the thinking part is here or not when you're meeting life from this. And the presence itself.
Yeah, that's really, I can really, as I work with my thinking part, and I have worked with my thinking part, just asking it to dial down, step back, or go take a break, put its feet up by the pool, right? And just give us some space. And you can really feel the shift in energy, right? You can really feel, it's almost like you're leading from the core, right? You're leading from the heart. I mean, I guess that's what it is, right? You're really leading from this kind of heart space and awareness. And there's a lot of peace there, right? There's a lot of peace under that.
Good description. Yeah. Leading from the core, leading from the heart and awareness. And again, that might be the ultimate practice, right? That mind training, coming back to the breath, right? And throughout the day, and I do this, I actually have my whole character step back. And then there's just presence, meaning presence. And you can play around and practice that almost like a training, right? Because the mind and thoughts are just a factor within pure awareness. So when you have them relax back, then you're practicing you as just pure awareness. And then the mind might come in front again, but then, so it's this beautiful kind of pendulation throughout the day. And again, mind's not the enemy. It can always be there, but if it's not leading, it's a whole different ball game when just the heart or that core is leading. And you can practice, realizing, oh, I'm leading with the mind, and then have it step back. It's so much fun.
It is fun. It's kind of a dance, right? It feels like it's a dance, right? It's constantly moving and constantly shifting, and it is a dance, and it can be, right? It can be that. I'm not going to say fun, maybe, because that feels a little disingenuous, but it can be that fluid. Maybe that's the word. It can be that fluid, right? Stepping in, stepping out, stepping in, stepping out. Yeah, that's beautiful.
Yeah, and it's and you could say it's knowing your authenticity more and more. We're not the mind; it's just a factor of who we are. So, if anything, when you're doing that, you're just finding your wholeness, right? Oh, I'm pure awareness a lot of the time, and thoughts are there. You can pull thoughts up and use them if you need to. But more and more, your wholeness and your authenticity and your unconditional love is just meeting yourself. I mean, everything out there is you. That's a whole nother discussion. Every client I see is me. I mean, it's easy to have compassion when it's just a version of me at one time, at a different time. And, so that it's just a development of love and wisdom that we're really talking about, isn't it, Kate?
I mean, it is love, really, isn't it? Right? Seeing
wisdom. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is that love, love and wisdom.
True. It's finding, they talk about your true nature, knowing what's your true nature. For some people, it might have a more wisdom component. For other people, true nature might have a more love component, or compassion. So it's important that the words are fluid, because your true nature is not your thinking.
That is not fixed, right? It's not fixed, and it's not thinking, right? Thoughts are not facts, right? We are not.
No, they're not. Yeah. Feelings are not facts. Yeah.
For sure. For sure.
Although you do want to respect them. They have a great saying here about the ocean. You don't want to fear the ocean, but you want to respect it. You don't want to fear thoughts, but you do want to respect the thinking process and all your parts and your trauma and your emotional. You don't want to fear anything. You don't want it to overwhelm you. The ocean doesn't need to overwhelm you, but you do want to respect it and always treat it with respect and awareness and compassion and wisdom and love. Yeah. And then when you do that, you'll have that right relationship. The ocean won't hurt you, or your inner world doesn't have to hurt you. And like you said, we're back to that dance thing.
Yeah. And being with, I know in our sessions, we've talked about this concept of being with, right? Being with the dance, right? With the thoughts, with the feelings, with the dance, right? With it all, right? Instead of resisting, kind of leaning into, kind of being with. We've talked, I think that's one of the most helpful things that our work together has helped me with, is seeing this flow of being with. Yeah.
The flow of being with, right?
Even all the mess, right? Even all the mess and the yuck and just kind of being with it and holding it, and trying to have some compassion, and good stuff.
And to hold the sense that all our stuck places, whether they're due to trauma or the illusion of self, all our stuck places are eventually going to get unstuck. And I really want everyone to feel that, just that trust, even if you can't believe it or it seems so far away. Like at the end of the story is everything's going to get unstuck, because the clench is not the ultimate truth. It's just a clench. And, like if you had a knot and you undid a knotted chain or rope, where's the knot once you undo it? It's not there. So eventually all your clenches, whether they're due to an illusion or a trauma, you're going to return to your unclenched. We're back to the relaxed. You're going to return to that. So if anything, just hold that in the back of your mind. And as you go through the trenches and the difficulties, just our unclenched nature is inevitable. It's inevitable. Whether I don't know, it could be this lifetime, whether you believe in lifetime, it will happen, because the trauma is an add-on. It's not who you really are. Like all sounds return to silence. You and I could make as much noise as we wanted forever, but guess what? It all's going to return to silence, because silence is what sounds come out of. So you will eventually return to this unclenched state, and just in the long journey, have that be the one star guiding you on your long journey home, that the unclenched state is here for everybody
Mm-hmm.
and will happen. So just don't give up and be willing to keep going, keep walking.
Mm-hmm.
You'll get there to that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's beautiful.
Hmm.
Thank you.
Do you want to say anything more from your point of view or your experience, or anything you want to add to? Because you have such deep and wonderful knowledge as well, Kate.
I think, I don't know, but let me think about that for a second.
Yeah.
I would like to say that, the layers the knot can be undone. But I think in my experience, the knot and the clenching and the tightness and the fear and all the rest of it, the pain, it can be undone, and you can move beyond it. You can move. It doesn't ever go away, but it just becomes kind of part of your story. It just becomes kind of part of your fabric. Like, you don't walk around every day thinking about your toes, right? We don't consciously think about your toes every day. So it comes like that. It's like, okay, it's part of me, it's part of my story, it's part of my fabric. But the trauma, it doesn't define me anymore. And I don't think about it. I don't go around thinking, oh, my big toe, oh, my big toe, oh, my big toe. I don't think about my big toe at all, right? Unless I'm getting a manicure or something, or pedicure, then I'm like all about my toes. But, it can just kind of dissolve and shift into, no.
Yes, and I hope your listeners know that this is coming from a person with multiple severe traumas in Kate, and just amazing that she is free.
Yeah.
Free
to create, right? Since I've moved through and worked through a lot of this stuff, I just feel so much freer to love, freer to create, freer to move, freer for everything. Not much scares me anymore. I can live intentionally. I have a voice. I can set boundaries. I mean, I don't know. It's just, you can't, and I've written that book, right? You are limitless, but you really do begin to feel, not in a gross, grandiose way, but you do really begin to kind of step into your potential, your power, your true nature, right? We are vast, right? We are vast entities. Yeah.
Each one of us is unlimited.
Yeah.
Each one of us has that unlimited nature. Well, we had the thinking part step back, or your personality step back. You feel how unlimited it is.
Yeah.
You're everything.
Yeah. And you can handle anything that comes your way.
Yeah,
even if it's horrible, like a suicide, right? Or death, or, touch wood, right? But you can handle it, right? You can handle anything that comes.
Awareness can handle anything. Hearts can get stuck
Mm-hmm.
with difficult events, but awareness, your true nature awareness, can handle anything. Yeah. Yeah. And you're such a testament to this ability to transform. And if anything, I hope both of our journeys are, kind of an inspiration or an encouragement that no matter how dark it is, that, you can transform, and, it's possible to find your way out of the difficulty for anyone.
Yeah. I believe that. I really do. I believe that, and I've seen it for myself, and I've seen it for others as well. Right? I'm not an exception. I don't feel there's anything special, I think it's
right. Well, as therapists, we do this profession because we do believe that everyone can transform. Yeah.
That's right. Right. So thank you. I do have one last question, my sage advice question. If you could share one piece of sage advice with listeners, what might that be?
Yeah, it would be pretty much one thing I already said, which is don't give up. Don't give up. The Dalai Lama, I wish I'd printed it out. He has this wonderful little poem, don't give up, no matter how hard it is, no matter what's happening. Just that one foot in front of the other, when it's super dark and you don't know what's going on, just keep trusting the process. Don't give up, and that alone, I think, just will take you all, as far as you need to go to freedom. I didn't have any special qualities in working with that depression. I just never gave up.
I will put a link to that poem in the show notes. Right?
Okay, the Dalai Lama's don't give up. You have it, right?
I'll find it, or you can send me it. I'll send it to you. In the show notes.
Send it to you. Yeah, it's a great. I mean, he would know. He lost the country, and he learned to not give up, no matter what kind of crazy things we're doing to his people. And
yeah,
he's an example of how far it can go. Just amazing love and connection to life. Yeah. So if people want to reach out or they want to explore your work a little bit more, how can they find you and connect with you? Yeah, well, they can put my name, Amita Schmidt, spelled with an M, A-M-I-T-A, Schmidt, S-C-H-M-I-D-T. You can put that into Insight Timer. And there's tons of, I got talks and meditations on there. Dharma Seed is also D-H-A-R-M-A, Seed, S-E-E-D, is also a meditation and Buddhist site. Oh my God, there's like tons of Buddhist lectures and talks. And I have pretty much the same stuff that's on Insight Timer is on there as well. They're all audio pieces, but anytime I have a new thing that I'm doing, I put it on both of those sites. So there's just a lot there. If you like video, I have some stuff on YouTube, my name on YouTube. But yeah, whatever you'd like to, if you want to check in with some meditations, I have a lot of meditations. I will be sure to put links to all of that in the show notes so people can out and get some of these resources. And a lot of these resources are no cost. Is that correct? Oh yeah, none of them. Yes. Insight. I don't ever have anything that's for charge. Okay, so that's really helpful too. So there's no barriers. No barriers if you want to hear more of the words that I have to say. Blah, blah, blah. But sometimes words are helpful. Yeah. Sometimes words are helpful. Sometimes there's no words, and sometimes there's too many words, for sure. I get that. So thank you so much. It's really been really a delight to connect with you and just share your wisdom and your insights. I really appreciate it. Thank you so much. Thank you, Kate, and thank you for your sincere practice, your sincere healing journey, and your meditation practice. You walk the talk. I appreciate that. Thank you, and take care.
Thanks so much for listening. I truly appreciate you and your time. I love to hear from listeners, so connect with me at katechampionauthor.com. Remember to grab your free hiking guide, and please take a quick moment to rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Thanks so much. Take care. Until next time.